Okay, let's start with the rapid fire round just to break the ice. The first question is, at what age do you want to retire?
What age do I want to retire? It's an interesting question. I feel like I have a love-hate relationship with the concept of retirement. I think I'm going to probably find something or the other to keep myself busy. I'm probably going to switch into some version of, the next phase of my career, whether that's as an investor or as somebody who's going to take an active role in, in really, really making bets in the sector that I'm in and would have spent a lot of time in, probably something in this world of sports media or entertainment. And so I'd probably the short answer would be probably never.
How long does it take you to get ready in the mornings?
I can get ready in 20 minutes.
Favorite color?
Blue.
What time of day are you most inspired?
Oh, 2 a.m.
How many hours of sleep can you survive on?
I'm averaging 5 now.
How do you relax?
Uh, I love content.
How many cups of coffee do you drink per day?
Jesus. Uh, 2 on a bad day. Ideally, one or none.
A habit of yours that you hate?
Procrastination.
The most valuable skill you've learned in life?
Uh, you have to start doing the things you need to do now.
An early riser or a night owl?
I'm a night owl.
One word description of your leadership style?
Trust.
Coffee or tea to kickstart your day?
T.
Top priority in your daily schedule?
Um, Identify the 3 things that are going to be the most impactful.
Ideal vacation spot for relaxation?
Um, Actually, it's a combination. Mountains, some part of a city, and then something to relax on.
Key factor for maintaining a work-life balance?
Finding the moments in your day where you have to take care of the things that need to be taken care of, but actually not let the world around you overwhelm you.
All right, that's the end of the rapid fire.
Yeah.
Now we'll go on to the longer questions, which you can answer with as much time and ease as you like.
Yeah.
The first one is, so let's talk a bit about your background. During your time at TikTok, you witnessed explosive global growth and changing content consumption patterns. How did you adapt partnership strategies to keep pace with such rapid platform evolution?
Yeah, I'd say, look, one of the most interesting things about when you are in the space, specifically content, you perception, lags reality. And so what you end up doing a lot when you are at a place like TikTok in those early days is convincing rights holders, convincing many of the ecosystem, many of the folks within the ecosystem of content that the consumer has changed and the consumer's preferences have evolved and the consumer is showing behaviors that are completely different than what you have probably been doing. You, the rights holder, you, the platform, you, the linear platform, have been doing for the better part of maybe in some cases 50 to 70 years. That's a hard conversation to have, right? Because the innovation and the pace of innovation has kept bringing new things in new areas, whether that's VR, whether that was MR or XR. And so there is a lot of skepticism, right, about what is new and whether that new thing is actually going to stay new and it's going to be novel and then disappear, or is it actually going to stick? And so I'd say the difference was really showing the pace of that innovation and that pace of that adoption and the pace and the shift of that consumer behavior. If you juxtapose that with what's really happening in the on the linear space, it was very clear, right, that these two things could exist side by side. They did not have to be seen as competitive with one another. And so that was an element that really, I'd say, changed the conversation. And you see it now very, very commonly. You see lots of broadcasters, lots of rights holders that are on both places. They have their presence right on their own platforms, and they also exist in these let's call them third spaces. And so for me, it was the journey to sort of tell that story, but really be able to do so and back it with data.
And what made you make that shift from TikTok to Yahoo?
I think the opportunity to come to this platform here, very storied, right? Extremely well known, um, but I don't feel like we had really had a chance to see what Yahoo Mail, for example, specifically, could be, and could be in terms of the consumer solution that was waiting to happen. I'm a user. I'm a heavy user of email, and when the first time I thought about this opportunity, it felt very personal. And there's as an example, when you think about content or platforms, right? TikTok is an example of one, YouTube is another. A lot of the association for the end user is this is entertaining, but it's not furthering my goals in life. I'm not actually advancing, right? So there's a challenge with utility. Email is the complete opposite of that. Email is arguably one of the highest utility platforms in that exists. But the experience around email leaves a lot to be desired. And so I sort of look at these as two different poles, right? One is high engagement, high enjoyment, high joy factor, which is content, and then email, which is extremely high utility, and unfortunately pretty low on joy. And so imagine if you could actually insert a little bit of joy into the process of email. Even a 5% improvement, I think, will be meaningful in terms of how much time we commit to this platform. That opportunity, that challenge, is pretty exciting.
Tell us more about your role at Yahoo Mail and the evolution the brand is undergoing at the moment.
So Yahoo, as a brand, right, is not it's not a brand that's unfamiliar. It's been around for 30 years, and so there's tremendous brand awareness for what Yahoo is. I think what we're going through right now, we like to call it a bit of a renaissance. It's a chance to rethink all of our product surfaces across the board. I'm particularly focused on mail specifically, and that's because mail itself has not really seen the depths of innovation that a lot of other products have received for the length of time that it's been around. And so, what's really interesting about my role and specifically Yahoo Mail is I get to connect what happens vis-a-vis the product and how that actually relates to the outside world, i.e., partners, how they integrate with the actual inbox, and then for the end consumer, how do we actually meaningfully change their experience so that it doesn't actually look like every other inbox that's out there. We believe the consumer's inbox needs to be treated very differently. And we believe that that's going to be something that we are going to push forward with changes to the product features as well as everything else that we're going to bring in terms of value.
So email's been the same for 30 years. How are you innovating with email?
Yeah, emails exactly as you said. It's been largely the same experience, largely the same list view experience for most people. Uh, I'd say the number one challenge that most folks will, if asked, will admit is that they're overwhelmed by the sheer volume of email, and so ultimately their ability to be effective in what they do on a day-to-day basis is directly limited by the sheer volume of email. And so we saw that and we said this is an opportunity to do something really different. And our goal was to come up with a product solution that addresses this very challenge. And so we created effectively a version of email triage. The product is called Catchup. And in very simple terms, you start out with your inbox, which is filled with a whole host of emails that you probably are overwhelmed by. And you hit the catch up button, and it immediately brings you into a forced view of like the top email, and everything else is sort of grayed out. And so the idea is you have two options only. And so it's a game like interface where we say, do you want to keep this email? Do you want to delete this email? And we just give you those two options. And you can look at it, you can click into it, you can scroll through and confirm that you know what it is. You can go back out and say, I want to keep or delete it. And by doing this, we don't make you make a really huge commitment. We don't make you move in and archive it or flag it or do a whole host of other things. We force you to just make a simple decision. Is this worth engaging with or not? And if it's not worth engaging with, it's going to take a microsecond to make that decision. And that immediately starts to alleviate that burden and that triage that we allow you to deliver to your inbox. And what happens at the end is we tell you how you did. We tell you you were looked through a certain number of emails in a very specific amount of time, and you are then left with the only emails in your inbox that actually matter and are worthy of action. And if everybody could start their day in some variant with just the things they need to action, we think it would make a huge difference for a lot of folks. And so that's been an innovation that we are pioneering, and where we expect that's going to be a big factor in why a lot of folks are going to think very differently about Yahoo Mail.
Email remains one of the most enduring digital communication platforms. How are you leveraging partnerships at Yahoo to evolve email beyond traditional messaging into a more comprehensive user experience?
Yeah, I'd say the most interesting thing that probably a lot of folks miss, right, is that the concept of partnerships is always seen as a one-to-one relationship. Who is your counterparty? And I think what I think is most interesting to think about is actually a one-to-many relationship, right? So how do you set up the technology to be truly capable of having relevance across a multitude of different domains? So at Yahoo, our goal is actually to be able to build interoperability with Gmail, with Outlook, with any other domain that's out there. So we have a host of domains that exist that we can actually support. And what that means is your email account, which is something that stays with you for many, many years. There's a tremendous amount of value that people attach to their emails, doesn't have to change with the way you consume email.
And how do you, in these cases, balance introducing new features uh, like these all through partnerships without overwhelming users who prefer simplicity?
Yeah, I'd say, there's a lot of studies that have been done that if you ask users what they want, they probably won't be able to explain what they actually want. But there's this idea of once I see it, I know. And so just to give you an example, I mean, when we launched AI features for the first time, what we wanted to do was we wanted to take the complexity that exists in emails and really whittle them down into something that's more bite-sized, something that is more tangible, right? How do I take a really long email that came from a school district that has a bunch of different dates, a bunch of different information that pertains probably to my child or me potentially, and I just don't have the mental bandwidth to start to process each one of the blocks of text. Well, guess what? What if we did all that work? What if we used AI to actually give you a really, really succinct way to interpret that email and then make actionable steps as a very, very easy aspect right at the top of that message. And so now all of a sudden, this massive email that would have probably been opened, then quickly pushed into unread, and then left for another day actually gets dealt with. And you get to move on and you get the satisfaction of having addressed a lot of the things. So this is just an example, one simple example of how we're leveraging AI in the inbox to actually improve the experience.
Why should companies want to partner with Yahoo Mail? What's your pitch to those attending IBC?
Yeah, I'd say email. Email tends to be something that sits in the background for most people. It's highly important. It ends up being an extremely personal aspect of people's lives. But at the same time, at a place like IBC, you don't see a lot of focus on what that experience is like. Yet, if you think about the relationship between marketers or broadcasters and their end users, where is it happening? If not on their own platforms. It's happening in email. Every single marketer here sends promotional email, sends promotional collateral, actually tries to reach out to their consumers and tries to get them to come back, try to get them to come back and consume again, try to come back and actually see what their offerings are. That's what email is. And the connection point, the feedback loop element is something that doesn't get discussed as much. And so the opportunity at IBC is actually to say, by the way, what if I could show you that there are ways in which you can meaningfully enhance that relationship that you've sort of taken for granted and assume doesn't really have much to offer beyond what you already know? Well, it turns out there's a lot of stuff that we could be doing, and this is the opportunity to go do that.
So you mentioned how email is a place where everything happens in the sense that, partnership opportunity or reaching out, it's where marketers are. But what is the future of email in a world where people just automate AI generated and send AI generated emails? Like, is that going to kill email? Are we going to see an innovation that prevents such stuff from getting into people's inboxes?
Yeah, I think that's a bit of a dystopian view over the email. I think the death of email has been roundly predicted for at least 2 decades, if I'm counting. And something tells me that there's a lot more persistence with email for very, very specific reasons. If you think about email, there's not many moments in your life that you are signing up for an email. There are very specific life moments where you may get an email that could be tied to you're going to a school, or you're going to a specific stage of life. You are starting to apply for a job. There's a bunch of very specific moments when email becomes a pretty important facet in your life, and then it stays with you. And that staying with you bit is really identity. And at the end of the day, your inbox is a version of your identity. It is like a passport. And if you think about the value of a passport, no one would ever describe it as something that AI could effectively do away with or dispense with. Why? Because the idea of email's value is, yes, utility, but more than that, I think it's actually identity. And so I would expect the last place for that level of disruption to take place is in your inbox, because it is such a personal space.
And so, what specific metrics or KPIs do you focus on, if any?
Definitely focus on metrics. DAU, which is daily active user growth, is a outcome metric, and the idea of it is that you have a bunch of inputs that will determine that outcome. So if you are tracking DAU from a partnership to partnership basis, you're actually seeing what the sum total of each one of the things you're doing, how they actually culminate in an outcome within the actual platform. For me, that is the North Star metric of note. It then corresponds to revenue, and then ultimately it cascades down into EBITDA, which is the metric that which we measure the business.
And how do you then balance short term revenue gains with long term strategic value when negotiating partnership terms, for instance?
I think the concept of winning in a negotiation is a very odd and actually challenging construct, because nobody in a negotiation actually comes away feeling great. If they feel at some level you may have won, as they say, you may have won the deal point, but you did not win the actual outcome. Uh, the most valuable thing that you can get out of a partnership is that whatever you've agreed upon happens to be the template. But the reality is that you're going to deliver an outcome that's many-fold on that outcome that you have actually agreed upon. It actually becomes the template for and the foil for what you actually do together. And so for me, the most interesting aspect of that is, how do you ensure that your counterparty is deeply incentivized to invest in your relationship? Because you're not the only partnership that they're striking. They're striking several partnerships. How are they actually allocating resources within their organization to then actually optimize your efforts? Because if they do that, it basically means, irrespective of what the economics are, you're going to win out together, and that's the best outcome. And so that's how I focus on it.
So, with the rise of creator economy platforms and direct to consumer brands, how has your approach to business development evolved to accommodate these new market players?
So the interesting thing is, right, we've had different categories of users and frankly businesses for a long time. You split between solopreneurs all the way through to SMBs, and then you scale that into enterprise. Creators have just effectively become a new proxy for the SMB. And so when you think about them, you cannot treat them like the SMB category, but they are effectively analogous to. And so how do you actually create solutions, right, that actually will appeal to them? I'll say specifically in my role here at Yahoo Mail, we really are thinking about how does that creator's experience in terms of managing not just their life, but their business, which effectively is intertwined and tied to work-life balance, how those things connected in a way in which we can meaningfully improve their relationship and their outcomes. Their relationship with their end user, which happens to be all their fans and all their followers, and ultimately all the brands and all the marketers that are looking to engage with them. How do we become an integral piece of that puzzle, and how do we meaningfully change that? So we have to evolve with the evolving landscape.
So, what other challenges do you face when working with creators versus traditional corporate partners?
Oh yeah, so quite a few. So creators are tremendously resource constrained, more than probably anybody else that you can imagine. There's nothing quite like having someone who's actually standing up an entire business on their own and actually betting on themselves. But what's great about it is it also is an opportunity now for folks like us to actually leverage not just us as a platform, but also leveraging new tools. You mentioned artificial intelligence previously. We embed a tremendous number of artificial intelligence tools within our product set to actually ensure that you're optimizing the best outcomes you can as a creator, and you're not just constantly stuck in the mundane and the admin aspects of being a creator. You can actually hopefully spend most of your time being creative.
So, with the growing importance of personalization and algorithmic content delivery, how do you ensure partnership content integrates seamlessly with platform recommendation systems?
So what's interesting about a lot of the recommendations is everything that's happening is tied in some way, in some respect, to trends, right? Trends that are either prevailing or ultimately the outcomes that folks are expecting. So you have in this particular case, a lot of what we do is serve as the platform that allows different, whether that's brands, whether that's creators, or an individual who is part of the ecosystem to participate, but actually use us as a conduit to either get to the end consumer or produce the creative that actually leverages those trends and those outcomes. So think of us really as the place where it all happens, and it's either happening in your inbox or it's happening on the way to your inbox. But the idea of what and what's trending and why it's trending, we don't have to, frankly, take a position on that because it actually either way, it's going to happen and it's going to end up in your inbox.
The shift from traditional media consumption to short form interactive content has been dramatic.
Yeah.
How do you identify content partners who can authentically engage with your demographics?
Yeah, the beauty about this is when you're Yahoo Mail, you actually welcome both sides. Traditional media and new media or social media all need an endpoint. Which, if you think about where the audience is, the audience usually sits either on your owned platforms. So if you are a broadcaster, if you're a rights holder, you have owned platforms the uh, that the that the users are on and customers are on. At the same time, if they're not there, you're concerned because they're not on your own platforms. They're probably on social media or new media. What people forget a lot of times is that the other place that they are, which is not with you and not with social media, is actually on email. And so they're spending a lot of time actually organizing their life and managing all the things and how they want to allocate their time. And a lot of that is happening in the inbox. And so we look at this as really as an opportunity to embrace both of these elements and frankly provide the best inbox experience.
Artificial intelligence is reshaping content creation and distribution. How are you incorporating AI driven insights into your partnership strategy and content planning processes?
So AI is actually turning out to be a pretty important component of the process of your inbox, and so more specifically, the way you compose your emails, the way you start to think about responses, the way you actually automate a lot of the mundane aspects of managing your life. If you think about very very basic things like you need to follow up on something, you've lost you did not receive a package, you didn't actually for example, hear back from someone that you should have heard back from. A lot of these elements are elements that we actually can leverage AI to do that first sort of cut, right? To write that first email that's going to ultimately help that first draft. It's going to help allow you to then say, let me put my specific nuances into play, and ultimately, how do I execute that at scale? The challenge for a lot of folks is they don't know where to start. They struggle with ultimately just the act itself of having to go and chase a bunch of the things that they need to go do, and then they ultimately need some help with this that process.
What's your view on how traditional legacy media, studios, broadcasters should adapt to survive?
That's a great question. I'd say adapt to survive is probably the only way any organization ultimately thrives in its outcomes. We on the male side have seen this as actually an opportunity to really take, for example, what is largely a low innovation, backdrop, and actually meaningfully change the conversation with the end consumer. I actually think that approach is no different for broadcasters in this space. I think there's a danger of kind of assuming that it's somebody else's role to have that relationship and to build that relationship and to innovate for that end consumer, I think that is a dangerous game to play, because ultimately then your goals and your outcomes will be in the hands of another platform or a different venue. In this outcome, I think the idea of a rights holder thinking differently or a broadcaster thinking differently about that relationship and innovating directly to speak to that end consumer is actually in your best interests. And thankfully and conveniently, email tends to be a pretty good conduit to do that.
Have you ever reached a zero email inbox?
I think on two occasions in my entire life, and it was quickly, surpassed and eliminated by the next morning.
All right. Tell us a bit about your daily schedule. How much of it is meetings? How much of it is emails? How much of it is anything else?
Yeah, I try to protect the morning, like the early morning, usually between 8 and 11, to really, really focus on, a combination of planning, reading, and preparation for what I believe is going to be a pretty long day. And a big part of that also is ensuring that I'm going to focus on the things that really, really matter, and the things that really need my deep attention. I get to them right as the day starts. So I try not to schedule a lot in that slot. I then go into meeting mayhem, which can go anywhere till 6 or 7 p.m. Sometimes, unfortunately, sometimes longer. Um, and then I usually spend some time with my kids and the family, and I try to maximize that time and really protect it. It's important to me. And then I usually return for round two, which usually is my most productive. It starts at about 11 p.m. And on occasion, it will run on average maybe till 1, 2, sometimes even 3 a.m. While I have a love-hate relationship with that sometimes, but it turns out I can be extremely productive at those really odd hours. And I think you have to just find those moments when you could be your best. But I could probably use with a little more sleep actually in my schedule.
All right. So the last question for you is of a personal kind. What would you be doing in your life if not this?
What would I be doing in my life if not this? I haven't thought about it as much because I think that is it's a bit of a I would probably end up picking hobbies that are of interest to me, but I don't necessarily know that I would be particularly good building a career out of them. Um, but I probably would travel a whole lot and find a way to make uh, combine traveling with a job that required me to travel a lot, just because it would help me combine those two things. I am Harish Sarma. I'm the VP of Business Development and Partnerships at Yahoo Mail, and you can catch me on the Marketer of the Month.